Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy and honored that you are spending and giving me your most valuable thing that you could ever give, and that is your time. And I'm very humbled and honored that you are here. So thank you very, very much. I'd like to say a special thank you to Mr. Bill Walsh and all of the Power Team International family, Michael Silver's amazing host and MC always, Cheryl Brenner, who's just phenomenal at keeping all of us speakers together and on track, Jen Nichols, who's amazing at keeping Bill Walsh together and on track, and everyone else on the team. Just so appreciate you guys. I also want to give a special shout out to three very special people and important people on my team who are really helping me be as successful as I can possibly be and to help me achieve my goals. And they're just an honor and amazing women to work with. Melanie McSally, Farhana Cannon, and Angel Tussey, all three of whom are going to be speaking here today as well. And I hope that you're able to check out their presentations and learn a lot from them too. So again, so excited to be here, so excited. Today we are here to talk about one of my favorite topics on the planet, and that is negotiation and what it takes to become a master negotiator. Let me start by asking a few questions. So if you feel this way, type a 1 in the chat. Who here has ever felt that you have been taken advantage of in a negotiation? Put 1 in the chat or raise your hand if you're on camera. And thank you to everybody who is on camera. As a negotiator, it just makes it so much easier to be able to see you, and that engagement is hugely important. All right, lots of 1s, a lot of people who have felt taken advantage of in a negotiation. Okay, so for this question, put a 2 in the chat. Who here has ever felt that they have lost or failed in a negotiation? Put a 2 in the chat or raise your hands if you are on camera. Thank you. Yes, a lot of 2s. A lot of people feel that they've lost or failed in a negotiation. And then the last question, put a 1 in the chat or raise your hands if I can see you on camera. Who has ever been afraid to ask for what you really want? Right? So it's like, you're just like, I want to ask for this, but then that nasty voice in the back of your head goes, yeah, but if you ask for that, you're going to make them mad. You're not going to get it. You're going to look stupid. You're going to this, you're going to that, whatever that negative noise is in the back of your head. Who's ever been afraid to ask for what they want in a negotiation? Right? A lot of 1s, a lot of raised hands. So the thing is I've experienced all of these things, and every negotiator, I don't care who they are or how good they tell you they are, they have also all experienced these same feelings. Negotiation is about communication and effective communication. And so we are all striving constantly to get better and better at it. So essentially, you're just normal. So welcome to the club. So if it's okay, I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about my story. Is it okay if I do that? Raise your hands. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So I started out my adult lifetime as an unwed teen mom. I was homeless. I lived in the back of my 1972 Chrysler Newport with my cat, my black cat, Athena. And she would snuggle up against my pregnant belly while we were in the car. She was amazing. And I ended up having 3 kids by the time I was 22. While I quit being homeless, I was on welfare for over 8 years. I married a not so nice guy. We're not going to talk a lot about him, but it is a kind of an important part of my story. And I hit a point where I was tired of being tired. I was tired of not being me. I mean, I looked like June Cleaver, and as you can see, I really am a June Cleaver type, right? And for those of you too young to know what June Cleaver is, go look her up, and you'll see her, and you'll see me, and you'll go, what? But it is true. My kids were bathed, the dinner was on the table, the house was clean, I was put together, everything. It was just like I had a role to play, and that was the role I played. And I wasn't allowed to work. And I wasn't allowed to have, my friendships were controlled, all of these kind of things. And I hit a point where I was like, this is just not the way I want to live. And I remember that I had my youngest daughter, or my oldest daughter rather, wanted to have lunch one day. And we did all of our grocery shopping at the local food bank. And my oldest daughter wanted to have lunch. And I had one thing in my cupboard. I had a single can of tomato soup. Now, her mouth was really sensitive, and it had always been since she was a baby. She was about two and a half, three, maybe 3.5. And tomatoes burned her mouth. And it was always a hard thing for her to eat tomatoes. So she saw that I told her that she was going to have tomato soup, and she just started crying, just hysterically, because she just knew that her mouth was going to hurt because the acidity of the tomatoes was going to burn her mouth. And I remember I picked her up and I pretty much shoved her entire little body into that cupboard to show her that there was nothing in it but one can of tomato soup. And I decided then that I was done. I couldn't live like that anymore. I wanted something better for my daughters. And so I renegotiated with myself, and I negotiated a different life. And it started with me going to a community college where I got a 4.0, and I was awarded a full scholarship to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York. I got to campus right before, like, for orientation. I looked around and I said, you know, I have to get up every morning at 3 a.m. to study. And I'd study from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. because I wasn't allowed to study when my kids were awake. And I was like, this is going to be a lot easier on my own than it is with my husband. And that was it. I picked up my kids. We moved across the mountains from Pittsfield, Massachusetts to Troy, New York. And I became the first woman to graduate both as a full-time student and a single mom from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I graduated cum laude, and I landed an amazing job working for what's now Verizon, but was then Bell Atlantic. And after my first year there, I found a door that was open just a teeny tiny bit. And I had remarried, and after having met the man of my dreams, we just celebrated our 27th anniversary. He is amazing. He's a remarkable dad to my daughters and an amazing husband. And so he and I had just gotten married, and this opportunity came about where I could go work in international mergers and acquisitions. And he was like, take it, go. So we had been married for a short time, and he became Insta-Dad, and I started gallivanting all over the globe, doing international mergers and acquisitions. And I was working in Eastern and Western Europe and Southeast Asia. And I was negotiating with ministers of finance and ministers of telecommunications and CEOs and CFOs and investment bankers. And my job was on the finance side. And I worked directly for our CFO. And I was responsible for getting everybody to agree to pricing on deals. And we were doing one deal. We were trying to buy a part of the Belgian telephone company, Belgacom. And I remember one of the highlights was getting it was my company, British Telecom and Tele Denmark. And I had to get every single one of those companies, their executives and all their advisors to agree to a single bid price to put into a document. And I did it. And I was like so excited. It's still one of the highlights of my career. It was an amazing feat to be able to do that. And so, but I decided that I needed to get my MBA if I was going to continue to move up the corporate ladder. So I decided to apply to one university, because it was the only university that no matter where I went in the world, every single person had heard of it. So to this day, it is the proudest day of my life. The day that my 3 daughters walked across stage in front of me to get their little teddy bears with their university t-shirts on them from Dean Kim Clark was the same day that he awarded me my MBA from Harvard University. Now, it's a long road to go from living in the back of a 1972 Chrysler Newport to actually graduating from Harvard University, but I had made it, and it put me on a path where I started working with lots of Fortune 500 companies. And for many years, I worked for those companies, and largely Fortune 500 companies going through a merger, acquisition, or divestiture. And I started doing work where I found opportunities to negotiate contracts for those companies. And I've negotiated with almost half of the Fortune 500 across 53 countries. But I'm from North Central Montana, in a tiny town of like 550 people. We have two major claims to fame, one much bigger than the other. So the second of the two, is that one of the senators from the state of Montana is from my hometown. But the biggest one is that the bass guitarist and co-founder of Pearl Jam is from my hometown. So hopefully I'm going to give him a run for his money, and I'm going to be as big as he is. What an amazing guy. But my parents, growing up in this little rural community, we didn't own land. But my parents were small business owners. My dad first bought a parts business, and then when I was like 9 or 10, and then my parents decided to buy a school bus and become school bus drivers and school bus contractors. And so that's what they do. And my mom is a financial planner, and my dad is kind of a jack of all trades, and he does all sorts of little things. And so I remember, and he had a truck driving business at one point, and something went wrong with the truck and it wasn't drivable, but he still owed money on it, but he couldn't make money off of it. And it just was this whole thing. And so I've always just kind of seen the struggles of small businesses. And as I was working with these big companies, I just kept seeing the imbalance, the lack of a level playing field. And I became passionate about helping smaller companies level the playing field in their negotiations, helping them to be even more successful and more confident in asking for what they want, and even more successful and at getting what they wanted. So let me ask you a question. Who here would like to get more out of every one of their negotiations? If so, raise your hand or type a 1 in the chat. In our negotiation mastery program at Venn Negotiation, we are going to show you how to do exactly that. You are actually going to practice negotiating. Would you ever do public speaking and not practice it? No. The problem is we don't practice negotiation enough. So you will practice negotiating, and I will give you real-time feedback. Harvard Law School is where the program on negotiation exists. The book Getting to Yes, which is one of the seminal books in the area of negotiation, was written. Those people were my professors, and I am going to give you hands-on direct feedback and input on your negotiation. And anytime, that's what we do in our program, in our big signature program, our negotiation mastery course. It is $14.97 today, or $3.97 for 6 months. So you can do it either way. But here's the thing. Who in here likes to win? Who likes to win? We all like to win. Say after me. I like to win. Yes, we all like to win. So let's talk about, what does it mean to be a master negotiator? So you can see on my logo here that it is a 3-circle Venn diagram. And the V cradles what we call the Venn zone, which is the area of common ground. It's the point where agreement happens. And agreement happens at the intersection of these 3 circles. The first circle is knowing what to ask for, the analytics of what you do, the economics, the numbers. The second thing is the how we ask. It is your negotiation style. It's effective communication. It's how you deal with difficult people. It is the people. So we have the numbers and we have the people. And then the third thing is actually making sure you get what your counterpart said they were going to give you, and that you give what you said you were going to give. And that comes down to contracts, which is words. So the Venn zone happens, the point of agreement happens at the intersection of nothing more than numbers, people, and words. So let's talk about those three things. So what to ask for? So one of the biggest mistakes that people make in negotiation is that they're not prepared. They do not do enough to understand what they need versus they want. I was just reading a book by Alexander Carter called Ask for More. And the thing is that we don't often do a very good job of delineating what we need from what our demands are in a negotiation. And it was very, she had a very interesting statistic and based on some research that she did. And she's an attorney, she's a professor in law out of Columbia. And the statistic was that only out of all the negotiations that happen in the world every day, only 7% of negotiators know how to ask questions and ask good questions. And the reason for that is because we're not prepared. We cannot clearly articulate what we need versus what we want. We don't know how to research. We don't know how to put our pricing in context with what goes into our product. We don't communicate. We just don't have that language. So we don't develop a case, because if we can't develop a case, I mean, the whole thing about a negotiation, because negotiating is really just communication on steroids. It is being able to develop a case and persuade somebody to buy into the case that you're developing. So you have to do that by researching what it is you actually need and understanding, whether it's like a job situation. So I'll talk to people a lot of times about jobs, and they'll say, well, I want this salary. Now, the kind of my first reaction is, what do you need that salary for? What does that salary do? Now, notice, which question did I not ask? I did not ask why. Why do you need that? Why puts you in a very defensive place. It puts you in almost into gives you the ability to start to accuse something. And this is something Alexandra Carter talks about in her book as well. But it's true. Well, why do you need that? It's like it puts you automatically on the defensive versus what do you need it for? So now, who are you asking this question of? You're asking you this question, because one of the big things that people don't pay attention to is they'll either spend a lot of time trying to guess and figure out what their counterparts are doing, but they really don't look enough internally to be successful at negotiation. And negotiation starts with you. You have to be very clear in what it is that you need and want. Because if you can't figure that out, then you're never going to figure out what the trade-offs are and how you're going to be able, and you're just never going to be able to reach the greatest level of success in your negotiation. So how do you develop a case? There in our negotiation mastery class, we talk about how you develop a case. So we walk you through a very easy step-by-step process for developing a business case, because in negotiation, it's not about accuracy. Negotiation is about order of magnitude. The other thing negotiation is about the lifetime of a relationship. The best salesperson will tell you that the best customer they have, their best customer is the customer that they have. And if you believe in the notion of a customer for a lifetime, then you have to think about the negotiation process as an entire lifetime long process. While your counterpart may win more in perhaps today, you may need to win more down the road if you have a stated policy of renegotiation as part of your sales strategy. That's a huge thing. It's life-changing, because it puts you, it clearly articulates to your customers that you are actually in it with them for the long haul. But developing your business case, let's say you are you are a company that buys and sells, one of the products you buy and sell are, I don't know, barbecues. right? So what goes into making barbecues? Steel. So if you don't understand what's going on with the price of steel, then how do you know whether or not the price that you're being charged for your barbecues is the right price? And how do you know if that's the right price to charge to your customers? So if your supplier comes to you and says, the price of barbecues are going up because steel prices are going up, do you just believe that? Or do you actually know where to go to research what the supplier's costs are so that you can say, okay, well, the price of steel is actually gone down since we signed our contract or entered into our relationship. Therefore, maybe I shouldn't have to pay more. Maybe you owe me something, right? It's like, what is that? What is that case? What's that business case? Everything we do boils down to numbers. So one of my big things is always, I tell everybody who I work with, never focus on the numbers, focus on the assumptions. So a contract, a business relationship, whether a contract is formal or informal. So an informal contract that's done on a handshake, it's some notes in an email, it's language on a purchase order. Those are still binding agreements versus a formal contract, which an attorney has likely developed. But so it doesn't matter whether it's a formal or informal relationship. But the thing is that if you can figure out what the assumptions are, what are the questions that you need to ask, and once you get agreement on the assumptions, the numbers that fall out of those assumptions, once you do an analysis, then it's much harder to argue with them if they've agreed to the assumptions going into it. So you need to develop that business case. You need to do the research to understand your costs, and what you need, but then you also have to think about all of that related to your counterpart, because you need to try to estimate, because when you're at the negotiation table, you are not the most important person at the table. And negotiation is not a point in time event. Negotiation is about the process of the relationship. But you're still, when you're getting ready to figure out what to ask for, and you're doing that, that's a very inward kind of thing. And you're thinking about that, you got to think about when you get to the table, now it's just a conversation and you're listening to get clues about what your counterpart needs and what your counterpart wants. Information is power. And in our negotiation masterclass, we teach you how to do the right research. We teach you how to build simple analysis in that program so that you can actually figure out how to quantify what you are going to ask for. And so you never go into a negotiation unprepared to answer that question. What is it that you want and what is it that you need? And you'll have the ability to be very clear in estimating what your counterpart needs and wants. So now you can figure out the trade-offs. So now you understand what to ask for. Now the second part is how you ask for it. So there are two kind of communication attributes that I kind of have boiled a whole lot of research down into these two. There are two communication attributes, and those attributes apply to 4 primary negotiation style. So the two communication attributes, the first is traditional. Traditional communicators think of old school, old fashioned, historic ways of doing business. They do business on a handshake because they have a deep trust for each other. So relationship is really important. They tend to be more formal. They wear suits. They might wear ties. Whether that's on Zoom, they might be wearing pajama bottoms, but still have a nice button-down shirt versus a t-shirt on top. They're more structured. They tend to like email communications or longer phone calls. They like meetings. They like making sure that all the people that need to be included in a decision are included, and that stuff's all together. They like thoroughness. Whereas the flip side of that is a more modern communicator, and that attribute is really just the opposite. They like things communicated in short bullet formats. They often prefer text. They don't mind phone calls as long as they're short and to the point. They do not like long meetings. They especially cannot stand meetings where they don't think that there are actionable outcomes or where key decisions are not being made. And if they think a meeting is being held just to make somebody happy politically, they're going to be incredibly frustrated with that. The communication attributes are important because if you are a traditional communicator and you are negotiating with somebody who's a modern communicator, and you send a modern communicator a long 5-paragraph email, I guarantee you they will not read it. Unless you send them a bulleted format something, then they'll read it. And vice versa, if you are a modern communicator and you're texting a traditional, you're going to lose them, and you're not going to create the goodwill that you need. And understanding these two communication attributes is important, because if you can adjust how you're communicating, it creates goodwill and it creates an environment for agreement. It makes agreement more likely. So both of those attributes apply to each of the 4 communication style or negotiation styles. So what are the negotiation styles and why do they matter? And the thing is that the challenge with negotiation styles is that we all have a default style. If you actually go to, if you text negotiate to 26786, you can learn your default negotiation style by taking our negotiation quiz. If you're outside the United States, just go to www.vennegotiation, spelled here, .com, and you'll be able to do the same thing. But it's important because it's something that we don't teach. We just, even at Harvard, in any negotiation program I've ever taken, it's literally you go in, you get a case study, you go off, you negotiate, and that's it. Done and dusted. And you're out. You go, you report your results, and then that determines whether that was supposedly successful or not. The challenge with that as a way of teaching is that we're always going to fall back on what we know. And if we don't know and understand all of the negotiation styles, when they are applicable, when they're best used, when they're being used by our counterparts, and how we have to adjust the negotiation style, becomes something you have no control over versus becoming a strategic tool that you can use in your negotiation. So that's in our negotiation mastery program. That's exactly what we talk about. We actually have exercises where you practice all of the different negotiation styles. The default one will feel the most comfortable, but we literally work to we literally have you practice all of them so that you get used to using them in different scenarios. So what are those 4 negotiation styles? So the first one is called a champion. So a champion is a champion for him or herself. A champion is all about winning. They care about nothing else but winning. In fact, they will sometimes agree to things that are not in their best interest solely because they think agreeing to do so would mean defeating their opponent, and they are all about conquering their opponent in a negotiation. And they see negotiation as a battle to be won. Like they're going out on the battlefield with every piece of armor, every weapon that they can find, because they are going to annihilate you, and wiping everybody off the battlefield is the way that they win. Now, you can hear that, and if you are a champion, you might be sitting up a little straighter in your chair and be a little frustrated with me, and that's fine, because the challenge is that there are about 10% of negotiators that fall into this category. And while it is a phenomenal negotiation style, especially if you are in a haggling situation where you are negotiating for a single thing and there's just 1 or maybe 2 variables at play, right? It has some big challenges because the champion inherently can be very aggressive in their style. One of the challenges for this style is longevity in their relationships. And this can cost you money, a lot of money. If you are a champion, one of the things that you have to be concerned about is your ability to maintain long-term relationships, because the champion is not necessarily good at creating ongoing goodwill. Usually, or a lot of times, what happens is that a champion will get into a negotiation, they'll get a deal, the counterpart will walk away feeling like they got screwed and will not really want to work with you. If you ever have to renegotiate. If you ever get into trouble and have to approach your counterpart to renegotiate, you are likely to have difficulty in getting your counterparts to come back to the table because they don't have incentive to do so. So that's a champion. So then we have a maverick. A maverick, about 55% of negotiators are mavericks. So this sounds like it would be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But it's actually also a very challenging style. And the reason why it's challenging is the mavericks, they don't care about beating up their opponents or their counterparts and annihilating them like a champion does, but they just don't really care about their counterparts as long as they're winning what they think that they should win. And the way that a maverick goes about a negotiation is they often have either like literally in front of them a piece of paper with a checklist, or at least in their mind they have a checklist. And let's say they have 10 points on their checklist. A maverick will negotiate point 1, check, I got it. Point 2, yes, got it. Point 3, yes. Point 4, nope, didn't get 4. 5, yes. 6, yes. 7, yes. 8, nope, didn't get that one. 9, yes. 10, yes. So they got 8 yeses and 2 nos. So the maverick will look down that list and they'll go, I got 8 of the 10 things that I wanted. That was a good negotiation. That was a great negotiation. But maybe it wasn't, because mavericks are not intuitively good at looking and reading in between all the lines. They're not good at looking for the value that sits in the blank space between on the checklist. So it may be that the 2 things that they didn't get, points 4 and 8, that the total value of points 4 and 8 exceeded the value of all the 8 points that they got. So did they really win that negotiation? No, they really didn't. But the maverick is so focused on going on that checklist and negotiating one thing at a time that they lose that ability to make that connection, and they sometimes leave a lot of money on the table. One of the other challenges is mavericks, because they negotiate one item at a time, which in negotiation kind of language is called positional negotiating. And because they do that, they often, if they are stuck on a point, they can get pretty aggressive. They can become very aggressive and have been known to shout and throw things and all that kind of good stuff, like the champion does is that as well. But it's clearly a successful negotiation style because so many people use it. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not necessarily a successful negotiation style. It's a successful tactic. It's an often used tactic, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good negotiation style. Now, again, it's also useful. That's the style of a maverick is also useful when you are haggling. When you have very few variables, it can be a beneficial style, especially also like similar to the champion, if you don't have an expectation of a long-term relationship. So the third style is a benefactor, and about 10% of negotiators are benefactors, similar in size of the champion. But the benefactor and the champion are exact opposites. So as much as the champion may agree to things that are not in his or her best interest because they are trying to because they're trying to win at all costs, the benefactor will agree to things that are not in his or her best interest because they are afraid of losing the relationship. So the benefactor couches everything in terms of salvaging the relationship. I was on a webinar recently with a professor out of the University of Copenhagen, Kjeld Jensen, who is well known in the negotiation world. And he made an interesting statement to me that benefactors is actually one of the 4 styles. Benefactors is one of the most challenging because benefactors often are conflict avoidant. And as a result of being conflict avoidant, they often will agree to do things that they absolutely cannot do. So while they may be preserving the relationship right now in the moment that we're having the negotiation, this overall negotiated relationship at the beginning, down the road, that tendency to agree to things that you can't do will come back to bite you and actually will hurt the relationship for the long term and will have the exact opposite impact that the benefactor is actually trying to have on the relationship to begin with. And so The benefactor, one of their big challenges is asking for what they want. Because they don't do that, naturally, they tend to feel taken advantage of and walked on in negotiations, which can lead to resentment. And that can completely unravel the relationship. And it also can lead to passive aggressive behavior, which is not good for the longevity of any relationship. But if you are in a situation where you have massive amounts of tension and there is, oh man, you're in a relationship where something has really broken, a benefactor can be a really good person to bring in to smooth that relationship out, to rebuild the initial relationship. You may want to bring in one of the different styles to negotiate once you have gotten over that hurdle, but that initial hurdle, rebuilding that relationship, rebuilding that trust factor, could be a benefactor is very good at doing that. And then the fourth style is an ambassador, which is about 25%. Now, ambassadors, out of all the styles, are the most naturally inclined negotiators. And I'm making a differentiation between negotiating and kind of bargaining. So the champion and the maverick are better at bargaining, and the ambassador is better at negotiating. And by what I mean by that is, negotiation is about seeing the unhidden incentives or the unspoken incentives in a relationship, in a discussion. And ambassadors are excellent at taking what looks like it's this big and then making it this big. That's something they're just naturally good at. They're very good at collaborative problem solving. The challenge for an ambassador is that they get bored very easily in a negotiation. They don't like to haggle. They actually avoid haggling. And so they'll turn something that could easily be bargained for into a broader negotiation when it doesn't necessarily need to be. They also can be really slow to make decisions because they are trying to figure out all the angles and just create this level of complexity that may not be there. But they do tend to be the more successful style in increasing the size of the pie for all parties involved. And so every one of these, we all use every one of these styles, but there are different points in time when they are most valuable. And so in our negotiation mastery class, you literally practice these different styles. 93% of communication is non-verbal, and there are non-verbals that go with each of these styles. So you will learn what those non-verbals are, how to determine what your counterpart's default style is, and you'll start to become more aware of how your default style may be helping you or hurting you in your negotiation. So then the third area is making sure you get what you were told you were going to get, and making sure you give what you said you were going to give. And that comes down to contracts, formal and informal. Contracts are risk mitigation tools, and that is it. That is all they are risk mitigation tools. But the thing is that there are 5 different elements of risk in any type of relationship, contracted, informally, or not. And only one of those risks is legal. So we'll talk about legal first. So legal risk, for example, is like AB5 in California, where California, they had announced that they were making everybody the notion of contract employee was going away, and everyone was going to become an employee. So for certain industries, sectors, that had a huge impact, and that drove the need to negotiate new contracts with people. It drove the need to renegotiate all of those things. And so that's an example of a law, something legal, driving the risk of a contract. Now, each of these 5 risk factors are also rationales for renegotiating relationships. Once you have a contract, you may need to go back and reevaluate that contract, and in so doing, you then have to renegotiate. And these 5 risk factors can drive the rationale for doing that. So what are the other 4 risk factors? And they are so the other 4 are all business related. So we talked about legal as being one risk factor. The second risk factor is cash flow related. So every relationship, you have situations where cash flow is your contracts can drive cash flow. So for example, I negotiated a deal on behalf of a client who did product merchandising, and their largest account was Coca-Cola. And my client's their largest number of customers came from the tech sector. It was the .com era. The bubble was bursting. The money was drying up in that sector. And so even though that was where the largest number of their customers came from, their biggest account was Coca-Cola. The problem was Coca-Cola was taking 180 days to pay this client. And so if you've got your largest number of clients or customers coming out of a sector and that sector is shrinking, and your biggest client who could afford to pay you and isn't shrinking at all is still taking 6 months to pay you, you got a cash flow disconnect and you got to figure out how to fix that. So we literally came up with a strategy focused around cash flow, where we went back to Coca-Cola. We made some changes in terms of shipping and different product mix and a bunch of other things in order to accelerate Coca-Cola's payments. And so we were successful in getting Coca-Cola to accelerate their payments from 180 days to 60 days. And it made all the difference for my client. They were able to stay in business. So we've got legal risk, and we have cash flow risk. Then we have profitability risk. So profitability risk is really about just that. There are so many elements of a contract that drive profitability. It's insanity. But I'm going to talk about an example when also during the .com era, where I was working with a small technology company who actually owed a liability to a supplier. They actually owed over $1 million in legitimate liability to a key strategic supplier that they couldn't afford to pay. Now, on its surface, that could have been cash flow related. But the thing is that the CEO, he was very much focused on the future of his company, and he was wanting to position his organization to be able to get additional funding. So in order to do that, he had to be able to show profitability and a movement toward profitability. So we used that as our rationale to renegotiate that contract and with that supplier. And we were successful in reducing that liability by over 70%, by restructuring, redefining how we were going to use the product, changing some of the product mix, changing the way that the supplier had to deliver the product, changing our payment cycle, and a bunch of other things went into that negotiation. But we were successful in reducing that liability by 70% because we focused on profitability. So profitability is embedded in every contract you make. A contract is a strategic operating document. And when you think about it that way, it totally changes how you think about negotiation. And in our negotiation mastery class, we actually demystify contracts. We go through each of these 5 risk categories, and we show you how to read contracts in a way that will streamline how you use your lawyers, any attorney that you would ever use going forward. So we have legal risk, we have cash flow risk, we have profitability risk, and we have operations risk. So I said that a contract is a strategic operating document. It is. Let's say, so I have a client who is it's a machine shop. They design and manufacture very small parts for NASA, Boeing, Raytheon, etc. And one of their big customers came back to them recently and said, okay, we want this size of contract. We're only going to guarantee 5% of it. Oh, and you have to make 50% of what we order. We get to expedite it at no additional cost. I'm like, say what? Because how does that work? So if they expedite half of the volume under the contract, it's like, what does that mean operationally? How does my client get resources? How does he resource up for that? How does he make sure he has materials on hand to be able to produce? What does he do for lead time to deal with all of that? All of these things come into play, and that's operational. That is an operational impact. So knowing that operations are embedded in your contract is critical because cost is driven in that. If he were to agree with that, hey, maybe he agrees to that 50% expedited clause, as long as he's getting paid for it, as long as he's recovering that expense and he can adhere to it, that's a different story. So we have legal, we have cash flow, we have profitability, we have operations, and we have strategy. So in strategy, I like to look at software companies as a great example. So software companies use things on a development roadmap. And in that roadmap, they have a plan. And that plan is that they are going to from day 1 to 5 years from now, they have all their sets of features and benefits that they're going to roll out as a result of their development. But if you have a customer that comes to you and says that feature that you were going to roll out in 18 months, I want it today, guess what? There's cost related to that. What does that mean for you? That's a huge strategic shift because your roadmap is a strategic document. So you're going to move something accelerated, that development by 18 months. So now you've got some choices to make. Do you move something that's currently on the roadmap and delay it? If you delay it, what are the implications in terms of revenue? How does that impact other customers? If you delay it and you move this one up, do you need different resources doing it? Is there additional cost? Do you need ancillary services or products to help do it? Do you have the skill sets to do it? Do you need to outsource something? Do you need to hire for that? If you are, or do you jointly develop it? So you don't move anything off, but you just move that one thing, that one feature up. Then it's like, okay, do I need additional resources? Do I have the skill set again? Do I have to outsource it? What's the revenue benefit to me doing that? How do I recover those additional costs? So when you think about contracts, whether they're formal or informal, all of these things go into that. And so understanding the numbers, the people, and the words that create, that's where that intersection of a relationship happen. And that's where negotiation happens. So in our negotiation mastery class, we teach you all of those things. So why do I care about this? Why am I so excited? Because I hope you can tell how much I love this. So that company I was telling you about, right? The company that we saved over 70% on that liability. I recently heard from him, and he just honored me so much by saying that I helped make his company not just survive that era, but thrive. That company they stayed in business for 7 more years and sold to a Fortune 50 company for $123 million. I made sure that that company existed. Those employees stayed employed. Everything that was, so being able to have that kind of influence on business is just so important to me. It just makes me so excited. So if you want to learn how to do things like buy 2 cars for the price of one plus $5,000, which I have done, and I will teach you how to do that. If you want to learn how to ask for the right things, how to ask for it, and how to leverage negotiation style in asking it. If you want to make sure that you are getting what your counterparts said they were going to give, if you want to be able to be certain that you are managing the risk in your business, if you want to take back ownership of your business and not abdicate it to an attorney who doesn't understand your business, then you need this course. If you want to make sure that you are earning more from your customers because you have better contracts and you have a customer for a lifetime, if you want to spend less with your suppliers and have stronger relationships, then you need this negotiation mastery course. So what do you get in this course? This course, it is a 2-day course. It is $14.97 today, or 6 payments of $3.97. You will learn your negotiation style, how to use it, how it impacts others, and you're going to practice the different styles. You are going to understand how to do research analysis in a different way, and you are going to practice doing an analysis and learning how to do that in a way and asking for what it is that you want. You are going to automatically become a member of our global community, and you're going to receive access to our monthly in the Venn Zone newsletter. And you get to participate in our monthly group coaching calls for 6 months, where we actually help each other in our negotiation. So I am so excited. I look forward to seeing you at our negotiation mastery class. Say after me, I like to win. And if you are somebody who would like to win more of your negotiations, sign up for a negotiation mastery class. Text negotiate to 26786 to learn your default negotiation style. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much. Cheers.